meeting. It's been a long day, and it's sorry that we're running a little over. But with that being said, we'd like to welcome all of you who are Zooming in and listening and on our website and so forth. And at this time, I will ask Ms. Glenda Marson-Fair to lead us in prayer, and then we'll follow with the pledge by Mr. Sailors.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would like to just start off with a few words, a poem. We need to feel more to understand others. We need to love more to be loved back. We need to cry more to cleanse ourselves. We need to laugh more to enjoy ourselves. We need to be honest and fair when interacting with people. We need to establish a strong ethical basis as a way of life. We need to see more than our own fantasies. We need to hear more and listen to the needs of others. We need to give more and take less. We need to share more and own less. We need to realize the importance of the family as a backbone to stability. We need to look more and realize that we are not so different from one another. We need to create a world where we can trust one another. We need to create a world where we can all peacefully live the life we choose. Let us bow our heads. Thank you, God, for the many heroes whose character models the words we have just heard in this passage, meaning each and every Greenville County District employee. Thank you for the excellent leadership, teamwork, a sense of justice, compassion, and cooperation displayed by all during many unbelievable challenges. Continue to grant us wisdom and patience as we look to infinite possibilities where the school year 2021 will mark the beginning of a new chapter where the sky is the limit in spite of. Amen.
Mr. Sailors.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in pledging allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, I will entertain a motion to adopt the consent calendar.
Madam Chairman, I make a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second, motion made by Mr. Saylor, second by Mr. Suddeth. All in favor, please address by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. With that being said, we have entered the public comments into the consent calendar, and I would like to just inform everyone that in-person public comments for recommendations we're going to review and work with the district now that school has started back and students are in school at least one day a week, hopefully soon two, and hopefully the goal is 5 days a week. We're working with the district to see how we can move into the process of opening public comments up for our community members. And with that being said, of course, there will be social distancing and you'll have to wait and there'll be a line. And Dr. Royce and I have discussed it, but we'll get more into details over the next week or two. So I just wanted to inform everyone and give you a heads up. Also, I'd like to commend Dr. Royster and the administration, as well as faculty, staff, custodial bus drivers, everyone involved in the district for the sleepless nights, the many hours spent researching all of the research out there concerning ways to open schools, move into 1 day, 2 day, 5 day, as well as virtual, all the options they have endured and researched, and the medical personnel that they constantly work with and professionals. I cannot thank you all. As many hours as you spend here at the district and at all the schools, and the sleepless nights, I can assure you, all of our board members, we all have sleepless nights. We're constantly reviewing, researching, and trying to figure out new and innovative ways to make sure our students are safe and will get the education they so deserve. With that being said, I will ask the superintendent, Mr. Royster, for his report.
Thank you, Ms. Winslow. Did I miss the consent?
Did we not approve it? I thought we approved it already.
Good. Thank you for those kind words. We appreciate the support of this body and all that work. Did that work continue? We'll talk a little bit about it tonight. Longer superintendent's report than we're accustomed to having, but it's important information. See where we stand in our reopening. You have very good reopening, as you know, very unusual. Talk a little bit about where we are, what it looks like, and our path forward.
Screen froze up and we positively regulated.
I heard the screen froze up, but it didn't repeat away.
We'll be right with you.
Okay. All right, while they're pulling that screen back up, the first slide simply talks about the 3 areas that DHAT looks at in defining community spread points. You all are very familiar with that. The incident rate per 100,000 population. If there's 201 or more, that's high. 51 to 200, it's medium. Low is 0 to 50. Then the DHAT looks at the percent of positive tests. High is greater than or equal to 10%. Medium is 5.1 to 9.9%. And low is 5 less than or equal to 5%. Then the center portion of the graphic they use really is looking at the 2 we just talked about. And that's the trend. Is the trend increasing? Is it stable? Or is it decreasing? It's increasing, they rate the trend as high. It's stable, they rate the trend as medium. It's low, they rate the trend as decreasing. You know, DHAT looks back 2 weeks. But every week, they issue an update. So the 2-week look back has a new week loaded into it, reported on Monday. So I assume it's still frozen. All right. Talked about that chart. What you have here is the look back for the last 7 weeks. And we compressed the first 5 so as to get all of them on one page. So you'll see the incident per 100,000, you'll see the trend, and you'll see the 2-week positive test. Very positive news. If you look, beginning with July the 19th, you see a decrease in rate per 100,000, going from 500 to yesterday's report of 114.8. You see the average positive percentage similarly decreasing over time. The numbers don't move quite as dramatically, but they do decrease over time. So yesterday's rating, which would be the last 2 weeks, our rate of incidents per 100,000 was 114.8. Our percent positive was 10.3%, which was high. Rate per 100,000 medium, and our numbers, both numbers over that 2-week period were decreasing, which moves us to low. That moves us to an overall median. Should those numbers continue to hold through next week, Monday's report, it would be our intent, continuing to rate as a medium, for us to shift to a 2. On the Tuesday following Labor Day. The Tuesday following Labor Day, we continue this positive trend. Next Monday's report, we shift to a 2. That will have given all schools 2 weeks or 1 in this lower environment for them to get accustomed to all the procedures and protocols, everything in place. Our elementary and middle schools that did leap week will have had 3 weeks or 3 days of attendance for each group. For those that chose to come during leap week, and then 2 weeks for everyone else, become accustomed to protocols. And that's going very well in our schools. We believe that's very positive news that we would be able to move forward, assuming we continue on this very positive progression with the rate. All right, you see that's simply a reminder of the 2 options we have. We have traditional. Traditional means you come in person, 0 through 5 days, depending on where we are, and you e-learn on the other days unless we're in a 5. And obviously the virtual program, it's 100% e-learning. As dedicated teachers at elementary and middle school and dedicated times within the high school schedule. The next one, simply a review of our 0, 1, 2, 5 plan. The pairings of color groups by days of attendance on a 1, 2, or a 5. The next item that you see is the number of students that we now have in the virtual program as of today. We have 23,006 students. We have 461.6 elementary teachers dedicated to 100% virtual. We have 245.25 middle school teachers dedicated to 100% virtual. We have 31.5 high school teachers whose entire day is virtual. The majority of the high school is staffed by teachers teaching some periods virtual. That 31.5 represent teachers requesting to work exclusively due to health or caregiving concerns. The majority, again, of our teachers at the high school level that are doing both in person and virtual. So you will see not only did we set up a separate, basically, school district within the school district, 23,000 students, we staffed it by transferring upwards of 700 employees. And some were hired specifically to vacancies for virtual. That was done within the last several months. Every student that applied by our 2 deadlines, the original one and the extended one, were granted a place in virtual program. We also moved several hundred last week into today from the elementary wait list into virtual. So those others on the wait list right now, they would only get to move over if there were space available in teachers' classes. We may have a little bit of space. We may have some that want to shift back and forth. We would do in the first week. They get settled into everything. Next one, simply a reminder of what we talked about earlier, and that is the categorization of low, medium, or high in its correlation to the attendance plan, 0, 1 for high, 1 or 2 for medium, and 2 or 5 for low. Simply a reminder there of how extracurriculars are tied to the schedule. And I'm sorry, the first one is, skipped one. Reminder that we'll give 5 days notice, attempt to for any change. If we have a dramatic change, particularly dramatic increase, that would be the exception to that. And that's also a reminder, we have some students that if we're in a 1, they might be in a 2. There's some that when we're in a 0, we might have a small group working in a 1 or a 2. Extracurriculars are tied to the plan. And then there's a reminder, these things you've already seen, simply reminders. We have instructional plans for students with disabilities. Access and connectivity for families. CARES Act funding free internet for eligible families through December 2020. We're providing mobile hotspots to those who qualify. The first order is on site and currently being distributed. We're awaiting the shipment of the others from the state. We're also looking for seeking additional funding for some community access points, which would not only benefit our students, but could potentially benefit residents of, lack of a better term, internet deserts in our county. And as you recall from last year, we pinpointed where those areas are. Also, an expansion, you may recall we did this with Prisma last year, providing telehealth services via Chromebook. So Bon Secours is asked to be included in that. We are in the process of adding the availability of that telehealth service from Bon Secours as well as from Prisma. We completed a 33% expansion of our primary internet capacity to 10 gigabytes per second. I think I let you all know about this toward the end of last week. We did a trial run last week. There's some projections off that trial run, and it showed us hitting very near our capacity. So we did the expansion we could do without restructuring some of our internal systems, which we're in the process of doing, so we can increase it even more. And in a minute, you'll see why that was extremely important. We're working on that additional 100% capacity expansion, 20 gigabytes per second. What we found in talking with other places is if you don't do a system reconfiguration and redesign, you can crash your system, expand too much without doing that reconfiguration. Leap Week went very well. We won't have numbers for you tonight. We'll have them later in the week. Students pre-K to 8, including those in the virtual program, their attendance was optional. Our requirement to have it was a requirement from the legislature to the school. You see some of the things that students did during that time. They did pre-assessments, they did assessments, they did some instructional work, made sure they had their Chromebook, and we understood how to operate that, did some orientation on protocols and expectations, provided a great dry run for schools, though not the original intended purpose of it. Overall, the feedback we got was a very positive experience for schools and for students. There you see some examples of the first day of school. And you see some students working there. I don't recall where the one on the right was made. The one on the left was at Westcliff. You see me with my mask on there, observing their hands-on activity. First days of school, day one was blue. Red group was today. Green and purple will attend Wednesday and Thursday. Great. Very smooth and effective implementation of the protocols put in place. Transportation ran extremely smoothly. We got students home earlier than we've ever done before, but again, transporting 25% at the time. And even within that 25%, there were a reduced number of bus riders. We had very few children arrive at school to a day they weren't assigned. Very few. Now, those who were not tested during Leap Week, as a state requirement, we have to test them, so that's occurring now during the first few weeks of school. Internet bandwidth use was well within our updated 10 gigabyte per second capacity, with a peak usage of 7.2. If you remember the numbers we sent you earlier, that hit right at our previous capacity. Now, we had an average usage of 4.5. We had about 69,000 students who connected on their Chromebooks, viewing over 14 million web pages. And there have been a total of 98,647 Google Meet participants, students and teachers. Some students have not yet picked up their Chromebooks and other materials. They'll receive them this week when they arrive at school on their designated day. Some of the difficulties we experienced. We had a number of students and parents reporting difficulty logging onto their Chromebooks. Although we sent the directions, the instructions in writing, how you log on with the device. There was some disconnect there for whatever reason. Schools and the district call centers provided assistance to help get students online. We had some issues with Google Classroom and Google Meet. One of the issues was related to, we had some Chromebooks where they had never logged out and logged back in, so an update didn't run on their device. We pushed that solution out today. And then there's one internet provider we're working with that had some sort of timing out issue related on how active they were within the Google platform. So we're working on that. You see, yesterday we had 4,703 help desk calls, and we had 936 today. Give you a frame of reference, from 8/1 to 8/25 of this year, we had 8,332 calls. That same time frame last year, 1,930. Quarantine isolation data. See there, we have a number of employees that are quarantined, and those employees quarantined, that number has been fairly steady and stable for the last 2-week period. A lot of those prior to the beginning of school were 12-month employees, but there are some teachers included in that number. At the bottom, you see that we have 49 students isolating or quarantining. Now, within that 49, that includes 3 positive cases. None have been in school buildings. Nobody in that number has been in the school. Updated guidance and protocols. Knitted masks are not permitted. Further research has indicated they protect only the wearer. Gaiters are still allowed. There was an initial study done at Duke that addressed one specific type, for lack of a better term, a giveaway from like a promotional marketing type gaiter, and it was not doubled over. So they are still allowed, and we provided a little further instruction on the most effective way to utilize that. And we have guidance that's been issued for safe choral singing and wind instruments. It has to do with further distance, size of the room, that sort of thing. All that's been rolled out. New DHEC guidance. The first one's not really new. We've already had that in place when school started. DHEC has now indicated that playground equipment could be used. We are clarifying with them the condition they put on that. They put a condition on it related to the frequency of cleaning or disinfecting without providing any direction as to what that disinfecting might be as far as its frequency. So we're trying to get them to clarify that. Right now, we'd only disinfect it 1 time a day. Well, we're trying to get from them, is 1 time a day sufficient? It'll be impossible to do that if it's after every student use, individual student use. We're still working through that. And we have rolled out to our schools the protocols for close contact and how we handle those, and we've all got a detailed description of that. This is simply some things that might be of interest to you. It's in the presentation, but we'll look back at it later. Where schools reopen, and then we're not successful in their reopening, we hope, believe that the approach we're taking will help to ensure that we are able to reopen successfully. And if we do have, not if, when we have a person who has tested positive, we'll have conducted our protocols in such a way it will provide minimal intrusion to other people. So hopefully we will not, those precautions should prevent us from being in situations like this. One I think most of us are most familiar with, there were some places in Georgia that opened totally virtual learning. There were some others that opened, and it seemed without protocols at all, or purely voluntary protocols. And those areas where they went face to face 5 days a week, didn't have protocols in place, those openings were short-lived. That's one that I think a lot of people are very familiar with, and what happened in that particular district. Again, we want to learn lessons, positive and negative, from experiences other people have. This is still accurate. We have the third highest COVID-19 infection rate in children behind Arizona and Tennessee. 15% of the state's overall COVID-19 cases are in children, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. And you see there a quote from Dr. Brownlee, the disease specialist at Prisma. And also an indication that children are not immune to increase in rates. Again, what we do and the actions we take, the plans we develop, are in accord with the scientific and medical findings that we get from health and medical experts. Children now represent about 9% of all COVID-19 cases, up in the U.S. from 2% in March. The number of cases in children doubled between July 9th and August 13th, and then increased by 21% from August the 6th to August the 20th. The cumulative incidence of COVID-19 in children is 583 cases per 100,000. And then it shows you there that they represent 0.4 to 4.6% of total reported hospitalizations. And only about 0.2 to around 9% of all child COVID-19 cases result in hospitalization. Again, that varies widely from state to state, or really community to community, even within states. Again, substantiating that the majority of children experience mild illness and or no symptoms, but there are some reporting much more serious symptoms. And again, indication that the medical profession is still working their way through this to determine what is the impact, particularly on children. And the last thing I think is on that slide is very concerning to all of us. It seems less severe, but their statement, we also need to understand whether there are potentially consequences of long-term effects. And that's obviously a great concern. What we don't know really is much more concerning, I think, than what we do know. Simply some more examples. You see some students moving in accord with their directions. You see some activities occurring in class. So it is not, as some might imagine, just sitting in a desk and hearing a teacher lecture. It is still possible, because of the numbers we have in there, to conduct class in more engaging ways than simply sitting and listening to the delivery of the lecture. That's the report on day one and version 2 of day one, because we'll literally have 4 day ones this week. Everything I think went as well as we could have expected or anticipated it to do so. I'll be glad to try to answer the questions that you all might have. And obviously we would plan to provide a similar update at the committee of the whole.
Thank you. Mrs. Goodwin-Caldwell.
Okay, Burke, I had a question from, it was from a teacher really, about the attendance of the ones that are in person, and if they didn't go to school starting on Monday, they have been, this is what they told me, that they have been instructed that their attendance would count against them because LEAP was optional last week, and they might not have gotten their Chromebooks or
You're
and
talking about
that the
a
attendance
100% virtual student?
no, this is for in person this week, and if they were not on the Monday to go to school, they are if they don't log in, that the attendance is being counted against them.
Well, let me give an example. You tell me if my example fits your question.
Okay.
They're not scheduled to come to Wednesday. They come get their Chromebook. Will they be marked absent Monday or Tuesday because they didn't do any work?
Right.
Well, they might be, but it won't. It will
Yeah.
not have a consequence.
Okay, they need to make that clear because the teacher said
Now,
that they were
starting
told
next
that.
week, it'll have a consequence if they don't do their work. We'll still track
Okay.
their absence. We're always going to track their absence. The consequence has to do with them not doing their work.
So you're tracking their absence this week, even though they are not in school those days, and they don't have the work yet because they haven't come on the day that they're assigned to. So you're still,
We'll still track it, but it will not hurt them or harm them in any way.
okay,
They're not going to fail because they weren't there.
but it's still gonna count against them that they were,
not
if
really.
they didn't log in,
There's
that
nothing
their
to really-
attendance is
there's
being
nothing,
counted against them.
there's nothing to count, but they got to go back and do the work. So at
Okay.
whatever point they get that device, they'll need to have made up the work that they would have done on Monday or Tuesday,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Okay, so they'll have to go back and do the work and turn it in. They'll give them time to turn it in
Submit
next
it,
week.
turn it in,
Okay.
some abbreviated timeline.
Okay, and I also had a question from a parent that said that they have two kids and in virtual, but one of them is fine with them, but the other one they were deactivated and they can't get any work. They can't get in. They called the help desk. They are not getting any, and this is 2 days that the child has not
You'll
had
get us their
anything.
name and contact information. We'll reach out to them.
Okay.
That should be resolved if they contact the help desk. Are they 100% virtual?
Yes,
Okay.
and one child is in school virtual, but the other one has nothing. And I saw where you said up there that the teacher would make sure that they get something until they get in the
You know, we
virtual.
can, if something's happened, they can reset their Chromebook so they can put another password in it.
Well, they were completely deactivated. One child was deactivated and the other one was fine in virtual. So I'll
We
get
just
that.
need to follow up with that individual. I don't know why they'd be deactivated.
Okay, all right. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Sudden?
Royster, 75 students on campus for A.J. Whittenburg. Do we have any idea about other schools, first day of school? How many was in each school?
We haven't compiled that. By the end of the week, we'll have that. Yes, sir.
Okay, could you share that?
Sure.
Ms. Grayson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think I saw in that PowerPoint that the attendance plan could change on 5 days' notice.
We're trying to give 5 days notice.
I thought that it was going to be more like 2 weeks. Well, I don't know where I got that idea. Has it always been 5 days' notice?
When we announced, we said we'd try to let you know 2 weeks before school started what we would start on.
Okay.
Then when we announced that, we said going forward, we try to give at least 5 days notice. Ideally, we tell them earlier than that, just like we basically told them a few minutes ago that if the numbers are still good on Monday, we'd go to a 2. I don't think we want to make them wait another week. Tell them we're going to go from a 1 to a 2.
So new numbers are released every Monday.
Yes. One new week is added into the 2 week.
But what I'm trying to get at is, okay, so next Monday, the numbers are level or down.
We'll start on the Tuesday after Labor Day at a 2.
Okay, so it's 5 business days. And
Well, we've said 5 days because that we think that gives people a reasonable amount of time to adjust. I think most people are pretty eager to move to a more days in person.
I know that's true.
So we don't want to make them wait 2 weeks if we can tell them, we're going to shift this thing in, we got good numbers Monday. We come back Monday, we're going to shift to the next level that we can shift to.
There'll always be a 1 week lag. The decisions will be made every Monday, but then we'll wait till the next Monday to change the attendance plan.
Unless those numbers move this the
Right.
wrong way.
Right.
And we needed to immediately correct or respond to something. We're going to always try to give them 5 days notice, 5 calendar days notice.
Okay. What, what if I was up at an elementary school today. The parents made it till 11 o'clock in the morning before they called the school and wanted to come back to school and said virtual can't work. And I think that's happening with a lot of parents based on what I've seen is they can't juggle working and keeping their kids in and trying to do computer at home. So what happens? I remember a couple of years ago, we had a whole bunch of kids that came from a charter school back into our schools because they were dissatisfied with the charter school. And that caused mid-year strain on those schools where they were at because they didn't have the staffing. I'm concerned that if we have a massive influx of virtual kids that want to go back to school, say we go to 2-day next week, what are the principals being told about?
Right now, they went to virtual with the commitment that they would stay the year and that we would allow them to come back at the semester break if we had space available. Now, the first week of school, we might do some moving around because we normally do some moving around during the first week of school. But we got a finite number of resources. And unless we can move a whole teacher over elementary school, we can move a whole teacher over, which, you got to move their load. And their load in virtual is higher than their load in regular. It's not a lot higher, but it's higher. Teach more students virtually. So it's not a matter of shifting this one teacher over to the 3rd grade in this one school.
Right.
High school is easier to move them back and forth because the teachers are still right there in the building and they're on that schedule. But their class sizes are a little bit larger virtually as well. Middle school is the most difficult because you got to have a whole team. Because students, they're team. So to go recreate a team in a school somewhere, we got to put 4 teachers in there and maybe some related arts teachers. That was the reason we were very clear at the outset. We understand this is different and new. You got to make a long-term commitment to it.
My next question is for Doug. Even though they signed a piece of paper saying they want to commit for a year, what is the legal right of a child to come back to school in person if they get into it and decide that virtual school is not working?
I believe our position, and supported by the resources which we've devoted to the virtual program, is it's a very valuable, rigorous education. And I believe, given the concerns about resources allocating back and forth and posing a hardship on the school district, I think there are legitimate grounds for taking that reasonable approach of requiring them to stay in virtual program, absent some sort of extenuating circumstance or something like that.
I understand the district's position, but what I want to know is a parent has toddlers at home, trying to work, it doesn't work, can't get childcare, and she lawyers up and says, I need to put my kids back in school. I would think that would be a pretty strong case.
I think several parents could make that argument based on challenges of their individual lives, and I think what's important to consider. And look, there are no easy answers here. It's a unique situation, a difficult situation. I will say that 3 kids myself, young school age kids, it is a difficult situation. But what is important here is that we're willing to work with parents, talk to them. We've worked with childcare about access to childcare. We've worked through that. We'll work to support them virtually. We gave them that advanced knowledge of that commitment, those expectations. And so, we would listen to those concerns, but, I think it's a reasonable position that we've taken.
The next question is about if a child, student, gets sick, they have to be out for 10 days. But if they come into close contact, they're out for 14. Is that right?
I would have to. Is that right? That's correct, Phil. Yes.
Why is that? I mean, it's confusing. It's confusing to the parents that if you actually get this thing, you're not out of school as long as if you might have come into contact.
It is confusing, and it's because it can lay dormant for 14 days. It can take up to 14 days for you to develop symptoms and to test positive and all of those things. But once you begin developing symptoms, they then shorten it to 10 days because they have to take into consideration that it may have been in your body a few days before then. So once you develop symptoms, as long as you have shown marked improvement, and you have been fever-free for at least 24 hours and 10 days has passed, you're allowed to come back.
All right, well, I would like to see that go out on social media because I don't think that's fair to parents. But again, if a student is quarantined or a whole class, do they switch over to the virtual curriculum? In other words, I mean, they're in live school. Then they get sick. Do they stick to the curriculum on the in-person learning, or do they switch to the virtual school?
If they're not sick, quarantine, we try to first accommodate them by doing the e-learning with the class they're in. Okay, that's at elementary or middle school. We can't do it that way. Then we might have to shift them to virtual. High school, probably going to have a teacher work with them like we do homebound. I mean, all these are things that there are no ideal solutions for because of the lengthy period of time they have to be out and the fact they could be really asymptomatic. They could perfectly feel like working and do their work. So those will almost have to be addressed on an individual basis, depending on the grade they're in, school they're in, where it's easiest to serve them in a manner that best meets their needs.
Okay, the last question is, I think I understood this from our earlier meeting, but if there is a spike in cases at one school or in one classroom, other schools will not be affected? In other words, we could have 1 day at one school and 4 days at another school?
That's possible. More likely, we'd have perhaps a whole class out. Perhaps.
And if you've got a whole class out, does the teacher just switch to?
A whole class out, the
teacher's out.
Right. Is it, does she do Google Meet or?
It depends on whether the teacher is sick or asymptomatic.
We need to get a sub, right?
I'm sorry?
If the teacher's sick, we have to get a sub
Yes.
from an ever-shrinking pool of substitutes.
Yes.
What is the state doing? This may be a question for Julie. What is the state doing about attendance policy? I mean, I see kids.
The attendance for students. We need to emphasize that students need to be there when they're well. They need to stay home if they're sick or they even feel like they're sick. And other than that, they don't need to worry about their attendance. They need to worry about doing their work. That's what they need to be focused on.
So what about seat time?
Forget about seat time. That's waived. There is no seat time.
All right, that's all the questions I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grayson. Dr. Crystal Balucana.
Yes, Dr. Webster, I'd like to read this to say that based on where we are with the improvements to health in the community right now, and the fact that we're decreasing in terms of rates of incidence and spread, that we could, according to the framework we've adopted, elect to either stay at 1 day or move to 2 days based on the framework we adopted for medium?
Yes.
Okay. Because even with medium, there's still, it's a kind of issue that we have reason to be fearful of and careful of as we are doing. So no one should misunderstand, because there's medium risk that means somehow it's not serious, especially when we have our local medical community like Prisma saying that we have, the American Academy of Pediatrics saying that 15% of the state's cases are in children, and that's much higher than the rate in most states. Is that correct? Only 2 other states, Arizona and Tennessee, had a higher rate in children.
Yes.
Did they speculate as to why children are disproportionately affected in South Carolina compared to other states?
I didn't see any speculation as to it. I mean, they might have, but I didn't see it. I think the important thing to remember is we talked about this, I think, several times before. It's always good to go back to frequently wash your hands, use sanitizer, stay home if you don't feel well, stay 6 feet apart, wear a mask when you're not. Those are kind of the 4 cornerstones of keeping people safe. And in a 1 or a 2, we can keep people 6 feet apart. We can't go to a 5 and keep people 6 feet apart. There's not enough space.
Which is why we would never consider going anywhere other than a 1 or 2, so long as it is medium.
Medium.
And unless it was low across the board, we could not consider.
I think
5.
you'd have to be very cautious when we get to a point we could move to a 5. You have to be very cautious there, because really can't maintain the 6 feet.
We're pretty much saying we're not going to follow the protocols anymore if we do that, which would mean we're very unlikely to do that. Since
we need to be at a point where some decision by medical professionals said, well, you're at a point where you don't need to be concerned with that. Maybe you wear a mask all day. Well, maybe that's the trade-off. If you look at the floor, the blue tape, that's 800 square feet. That's a classroom. So you can imagine how you can position people in that 800 square feet, keep them 6 feet apart. So some pictures of that. Very easy on a 1. Certainly can be done and maintained on a 2. Still allow a little bit of movement around.
we get to a 2, what is the highest number of students we would expect to see in a classroom?
It depends on the grade level and the subject. You could have in a high school 16 to 18 students in a room.
And still keep the social distancing? Okay.
And some high schools, it means the teacher might have to teach in a different room in a period that had a larger number of students. Because although there might all be a base of 800 square feet, because of the way some of them are laid out, they might have a column that passes through it, or they might have a built-in the middle of a wall. It may constrain what they can do in there. So that's where we have the larger class sizes. All those principals have looked at what a 2 looks like. They figured out whether they can put them in the room they're normally in, or whether this group has to go to a different room for their 4th period class, for example.
I am one of those who has been willing to be extremely cautious, and so thankful for your following medical evidence for your decision making. even though that has been very hard to do publicly. But
Right thing to do.
I also want to say that I would be very thankful to see us move to 2 instead of 1, so long as you have set the foundation here with the 1 per day for people to learn the protocols and begin following them, and also that you are guaranteeing that no classroom will be set up such that they cannot maintain that social distance if we go to 2. And I think that's what you're saying. And if so, I would love to see us move in that direction. So as soon as you can.
Hopefully we'll continue to get over the next several days. We look at it every day, but we get that report once a week. Hopefully that positive trend will continue.
Thank you. Ms. Wells.
Thank you. Dr. Royster, on the playground decision, do we anticipate when, I mean, you said we're trying to get clarification from DHEC on how we open those playgrounds for use. Do we anticipate when we'll know that?
I would have hoped I would have been able to share that with you tonight. Sometimes they respond more quickly than other times.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll know before the end of this week.
Okay. And with the additional monies that we have in our budget that we sort of set aside for additional cleaning and those kinds of things, have we already thought about what we would do in terms of a protocol for playground cleaning, sanitation without guidance from DHEC?
I mean, we sanitize that equipment like we sanitize the room, but the question would be, obviously, there's no way to do it after every individual kid touches it. You all know that.
Right.
So is their idea, I don't have the language right from me, but it was very vaguely worded. Following your normal cleaning procedure.
Now, your normal or your COVID normal?
Well, we got a normal cleaning procedure for surfaces and desks and baseboards and windows and all that, but playground equipment, that.
Yeah.
So, what do you mean by normal cleaning procedures? Right now, we spray the thing down, maybe once or twice a day. So if maybe every hour or two, is that sufficient? Is once a day sufficient? We need to know what they mean by sufficient, because it really becomes a matter of not so much the cost of doing it, the time of someone to do it, but they're also having to do all these other protocols. We're obviously cleaning and disinfecting restrooms more frequently during the school day. There's a lot of things they're doing that aren't necessarily overtly noticeable. So it's just going to kind of depend on what they say about the amount of time it takes about how many times they expect that to be done.
Okay. With regard to the social distancing and what we can accomplish if we're at 2 days or if we're at 5 days. So I think it would be correct to say that we were not expecting that 23,000 of our students would choose virtual, thereby reducing our numbers significantly for the number that's in the physical building.
Right.
So did we revisit those scenarios to look at how much if we could meet social distancing guidelines with either some level, either elementary, middle, or high, given that now we've taken 23,000 students out of the mix? Have we evaluated that?
When everything settles in the next 2 weeks, remember I told you there's some that were moved over today. We're on the waiting list for virtual. Then we'll look what are our real sizes at elementary. It's probably based on what we already know, probably not possible at middle or high. We'll look at our real sizes at elementary. Unlike we do some other things, we'll look at every teacher. When we assign teacher allocations, we don't consider Title I teachers. We consider them for these purposes. So would they be small enough that we might go more frequently we'll look at that. It's possible.
Okay.
But we don't know till the numbers settle out, but it's something that we thought about looking at when the numbers settle.
Okay. Because, you know, for instance, if there are, because of the way the numbers have shaken out and the way the color codes have worked, you know, I heard from one parent that said their child had 2 children in the classroom. And, you know, that could be because children were sick or because children missed their day. So you don't know, but it just
It also
occurred.
could be because there's another day where there's maybe 7. Because one of the things a lot of principals did, they keyed their daily groups off of the 2 days combined to make sure their total on the 2 days didn't exceed the number they needed to have in the room to maintain 6 feet. Does that make sense to you? They looked first at the 2-day total. So they might have worried less about the fact, hey, there's only 2 on this day, but there's 7 on this other day. I just got to make sure there's no more than 10 or 12 on the day when they're combined.
Right.
Some of them actually did it.
Yeah.
That way.
Yeah.
Worked their way backwards.
Right. Right. Okay. So,
I think ideally you'd want them all to be equal. But you have other things that come into play, other services that maybe students have somebody come in for, go out for. So that some of them looked at the 2-day total and worked their way backwards.
okay. But what I hear is you guys are continuously evaluating, and you aren't just kind of sitting back and saying, okay, we're satisfied now, we got them back in school and then this is the way it is. You're evaluating, can we get them back in school more often? What do the numbers look like to accomplish that? And how we kind of get kids as close to normal as we can, even to the extent that we're going to look maybe on a school by school basis. And at some point, is that what I heard you say to Dr.
We want
O'Connor?
to look at all of them to see if it's possible, because I think we'd create a lot of inequity if we only were able to do it in some schools. It is possible we might be able to do it in some grade levels at the elementary level, for example. That might be possible, particularly with the youngest students.
Okay.
We wouldn't preclude looking at that. We'd have to be, I think, very cautious about only being able to do it in certain schools.
Right. Okay.
I think that would create an inequity that would cause us a problem.
Okay. Okay. So the other thing I'd like for you to just explain to me for a minute is the whole not having schools open on Friday. And while teachers are working on Friday, we have teachers working remotely, which for some of them creates a little bit of a challenge if they have their own kids at home that they need to be separated from when they deliver that education. But you have some kind of reasoning behind that. So can you kind of walk me through why we're closing on Friday?
I mean, the big reason is the utility costs. We don't have the final numbers from last year. I suspect it'll be around 3, a little over 3 million. But, you know, we're headed for a cliff. We just don't know how soon we'll get there and how far it is over that cliff.
Fiscal cliff.
Fiscal cliff, yeah. I think it's unlikely it'll be this year. It's going to be in FY22. Might have a little impact this year. So we need to save as much as we can, try to mitigate against future cuts. That's one reason. Second reason, that is one less day that those who have childcare have to be concerned about their childcare. So it provides them an opportunity to be home. It is also takes them out of the building on a day where they don't have responsibility for students and minimizes the opportunity for them to spread it among themselves. That makes sense.
Okay. So the number, the $3 million you mentioned that's the total energy cost for our.
No, that's about that's what it looks like. Now you'll see this hard number in a couple of months when we get the fund balance. We're probably going to have saved about $3 million in energy costs.
That was when we closed from March. So that was April, May.
Generally
2.5 months.
Rule of thumb is $50,000 a day for every day we shut down. That's why we run 4 10s in the summer.
Right.
But in this case, we're not running a summer schedule. We're running a schedule where you work on Friday, but those who can work virtually work virtually. Then, for example, the aides in the schools, we want them to do their hours Monday through Thursday, which provides extra resources to help get students in and out of the building, follow the protocols. And a lot of principals have also used that to assign them to help teachers make copies, do some things like that, take care of some of the routine to relieve them of some of the extra work they have, because they don't really have a planning time at the elementary level. On those 4 days, their planning is on Friday.
Okay.
So those are the primary reasons.
Okay. And then I guess on that note, the planning, because there was some consternation from some elementary teachers in particular who had 45 minutes a day for planning. And during that time, they had to also check in with the students that were not in the classroom. And what I think I ascertained is that a couple things help them, even though that seems kind of difficult. And one of the things that helps them is if they only have a very few number of students in their class, then their daily routine of classroom management and what that looks like really gives them maybe a little more breathing room during the day, even though they only have that 45 minutes of planning. And then what you're saying also is they do have some extra support and can get some extra help in the classroom.
And really their planning, we move that to Friday. So they have the bulk of Friday. They have about an hour to hour and a half in the morning where they need to check in with students. So then they have the rest. They're on a 7.5 hour day, the rest of that day to do the planning and the preparation they need to for the next week.
Okay. And that's, I guess that's in addition to the fact that instructional coaches worked all over the summer to put together more content. Is that to make sure they had some lessons in place?
They still got to flesh out that content and how they want to apply it to their students and customize it to their class for the e-learning.
Right. Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis?
First, if you ever wondered if anybody was paying attention, I can tell you that my phone is blowing up because you said something that I just want to make sure that I heard you say correctly. You were saying that if our infection rate was reported by DTEC continue to decline, that by Labor Day, we should be into
You said decline, right? Okay, I'm going to make sure I heard you correctly. Yes, sir. It would be our intent to move to a Tuesday after Labor Day, which is, I don't remember the date, but the Tuesday after Labor Day.
That is, looking at the high, medium, and low, and how we get to 2 makes sense. The leap, though, from 2 to 5 seems significantly larger.
That's a huge leap.
So based on what the board has approved, you're looking for low. I mean, all three of them should be low.
Yeah, and there's got to be something that mitigates the 6 feet social distance. There's no way at every level we can bring every student in 5 days a week and keep them 6 feet apart. It may be possible, you might have been out of the room as well as ask that question. It may be possible for us to do that perhaps at the elementary level, perhaps at maybe the lower grade levels at elementary. Okay. That's just a possibility depending on how those numbers break out when we get. We never have really good numbers until the end of the first week. Because the first week is really 4 first days, we won't have good numbers till sometime next week, the end of next week.
Okay.
But that's a real leap to be getting there. That's when we'd start to look at it. Would it even be possible? The size is so small enough that in this 800 square feet, you could get 6 people. Okay. And remember, in kindergarten classes, there are 1,100 square feet. Okay. And there are 2 adults. Our first grades are our very smallest class sizes. So it might be possible to do something all over the district at certain grade levels and maybe not do it at every level.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions about virtual. So one, I am just blown away by how well this new system was put together for the families who opted for 100% virtual. And I think I emailed Mr. McCoy the other day that we essentially created the 9th largest school district in the state. by creating the system in less than 9 weeks, which I just think is incredible. We also moved a large number of teachers over to be virtual instructors. And I know we moved them out of their home schools, and I know many of them intend to return to their home schools if and when students return. Can we talk a little bit about the ratios that exist in virtual? Are the limits there the same as they are for face-to-face instruction? Kind of what are the caps that maybe an individual teacher at different grade levels might expect to
there aren't
see?
really any regulatory caps. Jeff, if you probably can wheel them off by memory.
The K5 to 1 is 25. The 2 to 5 is 30. 6 to 8 is 180 per teacher. The high school would be very similar to the middle school, be up to 180 per team, depending on how they put those teams together for high school.
Explain that. 180 per team means.
So a team of 4 teachers would have, typically they can go up to 150 in normal years. It would be about 180, and it can go up to 180. Right now, none of our middle school class sizes, none of them exceed 170 per team.
Okay.
In high school, they have to calculate that out. The principal would, all right, well, you've got an in-person class, it'd have this meeting in it. And the virtual class would have a larger one.
And related arts.
Almost all of theirs, except for those 35, they have a new schedule.
Okay. And then related arts and things like that at the elementary and middle school level, what are they calculated at?
So elementary is those are non-graded classes. Elementary, remove the non-graded because, as you know, the related arts is trickier at the elementary because we can't just move teachers because there's only usually one team of teachers at an elementary school. So we couldn't move those ratio wise to the virtual program. So those teachers are posting content. So those can be up to 500, 800,000 students they may be responsible for posting content for.
Okay.
Now they'll do live sessions on a rotational basis. So they'll pop into live. They still do live sessions every day, but they aren't doing a week like a child may not have music every single week like they would in with a live teacher every single week like they would in a brick and mortar school.
So if you're 100% virtual and you're an elementary school student, you don't have a music class once a week.
Live every week. Now,
you may have some content.
Yeah, there's videos and content the students can watch and participate in, but they would not have a live teacher every week.
And that's because we're not collecting grades in our related arts classes.
Correct.
And would that be so? Then also on the 1 day a week, 2 day a week rotations, if music is music being taught then face to face for every student, or how are students who are going 1 or 2 days a week getting?
So they're typically right now, the students are going 1 or 2 days a week, unless a school has their own team and they've worked out where they can rotate it. Again, as you know, in a lot of our schools share teams. They may have a 1 team, but then a 0.4 team. So it's not always possible to rotate that because it's a scheduling nightmare between multiple schools. Most kids, if they go on Wednesday, though, they may get art for, each week, the whole time we're on the 1 day attendance week, unless the school's worked that out to rotate that.
The last question I have is just about, I know we submitted our plan to Superintendent Spearman, and that plan was conditionally approved as long as we showed evidence that we were working towards face-to-face instruction. At that point, we're thinking 0 days, and now we're at 1 day and we're working towards 2 days. So is it your understanding that if we are at 2 days a week by September the 8th, that we are moving in the path that the superintendent wanted us to be in to approve our plan?
I'd go for and say if we were 1 day face to face, we would comply with our plan and submitted and approved.
So that plan did not require us to be 5 days a week. It required us to have some level of face to face working towards 5 days a week.
It required us to have 5 days as a component of it, which we had already.
Okay.
Since the beginning of the summer. But it simply required you to be moving toward that ultimate goal.
Okay. So is there anything that we have to do either as a board or as an administration to get that plan moved from a conditional approval to being approved? Or do you feel like we did?
Because we're meeting the condition. I don't think.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis, Ms. Grayson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to follow up on Ms. Wells' question because I was at an elementary school today and I saw the slide that you just presented, and elementary school is hands-on. And do I understand that teachers don't have a planning period Monday through Thursday now?
No, they don't. Their plan is done on Friday.
If they can't get into the classroom, can they go pick up stuff? Or is the building going to be locked?
The only people in the building on Friday would be the custodial staff.
I'm trying to figure out logistically, that requires basically for her elementary school's teachers to pack up their classroom every Thursday. So that they have their plan, I mean, their planning stuff. They've got to have their materials, you know.
I mean, I guess the only thing they would take home would be just like if they were going to do some work over the weekend when they went home on Friday for Monday morning. It'd be the same thing. Thursday afternoon becomes their new Friday afternoon.
Right, but then they're going to be planning on Friday without access to their classroom. And they don't have any other time during the week to plan, right?
Right.
Can they get access to pick up their materials on Friday, like maybe a window?
Well, if there's something they forgot, I'm sure they could make arrangements through the principal to go back and pick it up. I'll just assume they'd just take it home with them on Thursday.
Every week?
Well, I guess you'd have to be more specific. What particular thing or things are you asking about?
Well, I mean, like that science project that kid in your slide had. You know, he had his hands in some kind of goo. Well, she may not have that goo in her house, so she'd have to go to the classroom, or he would have to go to the classroom to pick up materials for a science lesson, or, I mean, a microscope. I'm just thinking out loud. You know, I mean.
But that wouldn't be any different from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday.
They're in their classroom those days. They have access to the material.
Yeah, and they'll have access to their classroom that Thursday before they leave to go start their Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Well, I understand that. I just don't think, I know that I'm hearing from a lot of teachers, particularly young ones, that are really struggling with this environment. And I would encourage us to figure out a way to make accommodations to their needs.
Well, you know, there's a lot about this that is not convenient. We have tried to make it as convenient as possible. But we know what's coming.
Yeah, I know about
We know what's coming.
I know about the drop in revenue.
And I think it behooves us to try to brace for that so we don't have to make even more inconvenient choices a year from now.
Well, I understand that. I mean, you have to weigh multiple areas, it's not a single issue thing that you have to deal with. But we also have to have teachers if we're going to have schools. And, you know, back in 2008, 2009, there was a lot of unrest. I wasn't on board then, but I knew just through the grapevine there was a lot of unrest among teachers. And what I'm concerned about is we're going to lose some really good teachers in our quest to save money. That's all I have.
Okay. Mr. Meek.
Dr. Oyster, if I understand this COVID virus, there's probably about 3 ways it can be transmitted. And we all know about the droplets and so on. And what I am hearing, learning, reading is that the aerosol or through the air, it seems like more people are catching that way than the others. you know, it's sort of like measles and chickenpox and other that we have caught over the years. And I know that because of our building program, we are much farther ahead in our ventilation.
Yeah, so we turn over all the air, the interior air in the building right at 3 times an hour. So that's completely replacing all the inside air with fresh air. Unlike a lot of places, we're fortunate all of our HVAC systems have fresh air intake. So we're not simply recirculating air within the building, it's constantly bringing in fresh air in addition to turning the air over right at 3 times an hour.
There are also a lot of talk about the filters that's being used in different commercial buildings and schools. Are we using those, or?
We use the highest rated filter that our systems will stand. It's possible to put a filter on that is such a high level of filtration, you would literally crash the HVAC, which would be the kind of, is it a 13 filter or higher, which might be like what they might use in the hospital, in operating rooms, that sort of thing. Our systems aren't designed to withstand that level of filtration.
You just said that it's turned over every 3 hours in the building.
3 times an hour.
Times an hour. Okay. Does that include the hallways? Do we have ventilation in the halls?
Almost all the buildings have ventilation in the hallway, but that's really the interior room. We have some, probably the older design buildings, trying to think which ones it might be, that don't have in the hall systems. They were set up for the room units to do cooling and heating of the hallways.
Okay. Also, a lot of schools a lot of different districts, different states are talking about outdoor learning. Are we looking at that, or what? How are we?
Well, only from a standpoint of is that's appropriate to what the teacher's doing. They're welcome to take their students outside. But then that's one more movement during the day. Unless they got a direct outside door access, then you're taking them out in the hall. The more you move them from place to place in the building, then there's the research and data suggests that increases the likelihood of exposure. So you want to try to keep them together and minimize their overall movement. So there are upsides to doing that, and then there's a little bit of a downside to it. And some things just don't lend themselves to going outside.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Meek. Mr. Shamley.
A couple questions. If we're bringing the air over 3 times an hour with fresh air, I'm not just curious how much a filter would add to it. I mean, we're filtering out something, fresh air coming in from outside. I was just curious. I don't understand that. If we're recirculating, obviously, it's a lot of good.
But you're doing both. You're recirculating interior air, and then you're pulling fresh air in from the outside. So you're filtering both airflow. Mm-hmm.
Also, having moved with the kindergarten teachers a number of years ago, I know she brought a whole lot of work home, but she also had a lot of posters, all kinds of stuff she needed to put on the wall. And most of the elementary, particularly kindergarten teachers I know, would like to spend some time in the classroom by themselves without students. And so my question would be, is there not a way we could provide for teachers who would like to do that to get permission from whether it's the custodial staff of the school to be able to have access to their rooms, at least for a few hours, where they don't have to have students. They're not going to have the planning period now.
But, they have time, of course, before school. They have time at the end of the day. They're welcome to come on Friday, but the air is running on setback temperature, so it's 80 degrees. So they're welcome to come in there and they can arrange that through their principal. But we don't run the HVAC systems on Friday. That's the point in the shutdown on Friday.
One of my questions is, terms of the entire process, distancing, all of that, if we move over to 2 days a week, let's say in a couple of weeks, what will be the difference in what we experience in terms of distancing, teaching, all of those kind of things? What will be the difference between that and the 1 day?
They'll still be able to maintain 6 feet.
Right.
Some of the things you saw where students were up and around in the room, it will limit that to a degree because now you've got more people in it. So to keep the 6 feet, think about this 800 square foot area inside this blue tape. If you only had 5 people in there, they can do some moving around where they won't be near anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
You think back, we showed you some layouts of the 2 days a week. They're circles almost abut one another. All right, if that circle hits the other one, then we've lost the 6 feet. So it more limits their ability to move around within the room and keep the 6 feet of distance.
But if they're just in school 2 days a week, don't we have, I guess the question is, in terms of the number of students in a room at a given time, you're saying we're going to have more students in the room at a given time than we did with 1 day a week?
Twice as many as on average, twice as many as 1 day a week. Yes, sir.
Are there other aspects of it? For example, we have the same classroom size, but we have more classrooms, right? Because at least 3/5 of them will be empty during that time period. So the question would be is if we had more teachers there, we could accommodate the students in the same amount or the same numbers as we would for the 1 day a week. Is that the main problem? Is
yes, sir.
Not having enough teachers?
Right. We don't have enough teachers to spread them out in all the empty classrooms and put more students in there. Because we sent those teachers over to the virtual school. But by the fact the virtual school ratios are a little bit higher,
mm-hmm.
we do have a little bit lower than usual class size in-person school.
So if I'm a student going Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever it is, I go on Monday and I have twice as many students in that class. And then I go on Tuesday and I have twice as many in that class.
Now your parent is your parent with another day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Monday, Wednesday, and Tuesday, Thursday.
Yeah, whatever days those are.
So if you're a Monday person, your parent is with Wednesday.
It's Wednesday, yeah. But on Monday and Wednesday, I'll have the same students in that class plus more students in that class than I would otherwise have. Okay. In terms of I'm trying to see here how that works out. So okay. In terms of maintaining distance on the school buses, I assume we'll have twice as many students on the school bus on the 2 day a week schedules?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And we'll be able to maintain that? I think the DHEC rule is now, 60% full?
If we go to 67%, and if a student tests positive, we'll probably have to quarantine the whole bus.
Okay.
Now, we're trying to make sure that nobody's within 6 feet of the driver, so we don't have to quarantine the driver.
Okay.
But right now, our runs are very low. I'm not sure we'd even get to 67% on a 2.
Because we're already about at 67% attendance, right? Or, 75, whatever that is.
We've got about 70% of the students we normally have.
Right.
But our percentage of bus riders is lower than it is normally. So we have disproportionately fewer bus riders, at least the 2 days we've run. It'll play out in the next week or so, we'll see. A lot of times parents take them to school the first day anyway. So first day ridership is not always a good indicator. So we got 4 first days before we get into what does that really look like? So then we'll get 4 more second days All right, what's it going to look like now that it's the second day of school?
So even if we decide, say, 2 weeks from now to go to the 2-day schedule, if something happened, we could essentially turn on a dime. Is that a fair statement? I think you mentioned if something happened that increased the incidence rates and all of those things.
If it were to dramatically begin to move in the wrong direction, we might have to act more quickly than a 5 days.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because we've already got the infrastructure there for the virtual and all that kind of thing.
Right, it's set where we can slide from one end of that plan to the other end. If you literally had to go from 5 to 0, you could. I think that would be unlikely, but if you had to, you could.
Okay. So in that case, particularly with those parents that have elementary school students, if you had to switch like overnight to all virtual, they just have to figure out how to deal with it with respect to parents and working and all of that. Okay.
Again, we don't want to have to do that, but if it becomes that dramatic and that quick, and even the real big increases, they've not been quite that quick. There was certainly upward, even though they rose pretty rapidly.
Okay.
Is that it, Mr. Shanley? Okay, thank you. You have, okay, Dr. Chris.
Ask if you have any idea why the bus ridership is significantly down, not in terms of our, the 1 day or 2 day, but just because of the percentage riding. And I would just be curious to know if we're going to track over time, which of the students who are bus riders also, what percentage of bus riders also elected complete virtual programming?
I think we've not looked at that. Now, one thing is, you indicate whether you ride the bus or not every year. So that number always changes every year. I think what we will see is that a disproportionate number of them chose virtual. And we'll try to look at that based on last year's ridership.
It just seems that that's kind of the opposite of what I would have expected. So I would like for us to try to learn from that as we do surveys along the way. Well,
and it may also be that a parent was more uncomfortable with the close proximity on the bus than in an 800 square foot classroom. And that we may never know.
Thank you.
Mr. Royster, Dr. Royster, sorry, my apology. I went to 3 elementary schools, 1 high school, 1 middle school, and 1 fine arts center. And I was very impressed with the way the classrooms were set up, the way the teachers handled the students. The classes were small. I was impressed with, and I know you can't do this, but the Fine Arts Center, one of the classes I attended, the instructor had his students on the screen to start it out with the students in the classroom, and went over questions and delivered some information, and then they went off to their e-learning, and he continued with class instruction. I know that the bandwidth or wide or whatever that Chris, y'all know, I know we can't do that district-wide. But there was also an elementary school that the teacher started out her classroom. Of course, the students at home on e-learning couldn't see the students in the classroom. I think that's the way it was, but the students in the classroom could see the students at home. And the teacher actually, they read a story. It was an elementary school, read a story, had some discussion, and there was some contact with all the children in that little classroom. I also know that people that have opted out and are going virtual are not in the same classes with the students that they would normally go to school with at their designated school.
In most cases, that's true. There are some cases where, like, there's a whole class from, an example I heard yesterday was like at Bell's Crossing. There's like this whole class. They're all in the virtual class together. But that's because they don't break out that way.
Right. And so.
Like you, I went in some classrooms where the teacher, this was in an elementary school, was doing a math lesson, and she was doing it with her students that were there. There were one or two watching it, and she was recording
Right.
for them to be able to watch later.
Go back, yeah.
She was doing all that at one time.
Yeah,
And that's because they just feel more comfortable with the technology. Some of them will become more comfortable with it as time progresses, and I think more would do that. Well, we don't have cameras in every room, so they can't see, to your point, they can't see the students sitting in the room.
Right. But I thought of, every school I went to did something different. And I was very impressed. I also would like to make sure that, I know we have aides in a lot of our classrooms, and just want to make sure that they get their time in, just like teachers do. And I just want everybody.
We've adjusted their time, so they're Monday through Thursday. They do their 37 and a half hours Monday through Thursday, which allows them to provide extra help to the teachers who don't have a plan.
Right. So I noticed there were people aides assisting teachers. And I noticed that there were teachers that felt like they wished there were a few more students in the class because they like a little more interaction between, one student in a class, it's tough. 2 or 3, it's good, because then there's interaction. But with that being said, we're going to move on, and I'd just like to thank you. We're going to move on to 4.02, physical education exemption. What did I say?
2.2.
My apologies. I might end up having to relinquish my chairman's position over to Ms. Wells shortly, but so let's go 4.01 employee grievance appeal. Dr. Royster.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir. Mr. Sailors.
I make a motion to accept the administration's recommendation to deny the request for a hearing of an employee's grievance appeal and affirm the administration's response to the grievance.
Second. Any discussion? Ms. Wells?
So I'll be supportive of the motion, but I would like to ask the chairman to consider having us look at our policies that were mentioned in the grievance and make sure we're aligned with the best practices of the district and the administration and the adjustments that have been made. Because I feel like there might be some board attention that should be given to some of those items.
Yes, ma'am. Anyone else? Is there going to be an amendment to this or just to address
Just
this?
noted.
All right. Any other questions? All in favor of the motion, please address by raising your right hand. All opposed, and the motion carries.
Madam Chair, if we're going to vote by hand, you need to announce the vote.
Okay, so,
People listening and cannot see us raising our hands.
okay, my apology. So it was unanimous by all 12 trustees. Okay. 4.02, physical education exemptions. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Grayson. All right. Second. So the motion was made by Ms. Grayson, second by Ms. Goodwin Caldwell. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please address by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. All right. 4.04, revision of policy, board policy DB. Did I skip another one? Y'all, my apologies. 4.03, agreement between the American Humanist Association and Greenville County School District. Here you go. Dr. Webb. Nope. Recommended motion is to approve the, yes.
Do we have to let that be on the table if there's not a motion to put it on the table?
No, there isn't. Were we going to,
Madam Chairman?
yes.
May I make a motion to table this item?
Okay, there's a motion to table the item. I'm sorry? And there's a second?
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if you table the motion, it's going to take, I don't have my Robert rules here.
Oh, that's right.
Or 2/3 to bring it back. If you want to postpone it to a different time, may be the appropriate motion.
Madam Chairman, may I ask if we could
Postpone.
well, the issue is not having a definite time, but if I might ask the superintendent when some particular information that we might like to have could be available to us.
Okay, hold on. Can I ask Mr. Sailors? He also has something he'd like to say. Mr. Sailors?
Is there a motion on the floor?
No, sir.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that this item be placed.
There is a.
It was not seconded. The motion.
Lisa seconded.
Did you second?
I did. I don't know if you acknowledged it.
I did not acknowledge Lisa. I did not acknowledge. I didn't hear her. I think it's.
Motion to postpone is appropriate, right? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay.
And I would say motion to postpone to a specific time would even be better.
Give me a second. Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to postpone this item until the administration has had an opportunity to do some additional investigation and return to us with further information.
Is there a second? Second. Any questions?
Clarification.
Yes, Ms. Wells.
Can we put a specific date on that?
And that gives us
Can't we get an attorney on the phone on a specific date? I mean, Doug's got to make phone calls. That could take one day, could take 1 month. We don't know.
I was clarifying based on what I heard our attorney say. So.
Yeah.
I think that motion gives the flexibility for the administration to bring this to you anytime for consideration, including potentially after for a special call meeting in the next few weeks. So I think this gives enough flexibility to allow the administration to do some more due diligence.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I'm fine with that motion because that has the same intent.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
I don't know if I need to withdraw my motion or if there needs to be.
Your motion was not seconded.
1 second.
I didn't acknowledge Lisa. I didn't hear her.
Okay.
Okay, so we're good. We're good. Okay. So there's a motion on the floor and there's been a second. Nancy, do you want to read the motion?
Yes, ma'am, and I'm not sure I got all of Mr. Saylor's words.
Throw it out and let's see what happens.
To postpone this item until the administration has had the opportunity to further investigate.
And
Ready?
We came out of executive session and no action was taken. At this time, there's a motion on the floor by Mr. Sailors, and it was seconded by Mr. Chambly. Any questions?
The motion again.
Nancy, Ms. Fitzer, would you please read the motion? Thank you.
Motion to postpone this item to a future meeting until the administration has had the opportunity to conduct an additional investigation and return to the board with additional information at the appropriate time.
Okay. All right. All in favor, please. I think we're going to do roll call.
May I ask a clarifying question about the motion?
What would,
I just don't understand, and maybe we've already covered it. If so, I'll withdraw it. But just when I heard this time an investigation.
yeah, they're just going to go back and see and check and.
But investigation just sounds like we're doing something.
The word investigation was something I put out there. If you think more comfortable with a different word, fine. But the whole context is to give the staff an opportunity to go ask questions, have a conversation, and bring the results back to us.
That's what I understood you to say.
So it's basically an investigation to come up with. What do you, are we good with this? You want to change the wording?
Not unless the maker of the motion would like to.
It's going to go down in a flame of glory anyway. Who cares? Let's vote.
Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Bush, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, she's been.
Mr. Shanley?
Yes.
Ms. Goodwin Caldwell?
No.
Ms. Grayson?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Meade?
Pass.
Mrs. Morrison Fair?
Yes.
Dr. Ball Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Saylor?
Yes.
Mr. Sutton?
Yes.
Ms. Wells? Ms. Levinas Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Meade?
No.
9 yes, 3 no, the motion carried.
All right. 4.04, revision of board policy DIDB, internal auditing.
Roger, are you doing this? Are you making that?
Okay, I'm trying to get my recommended motion from the internal auditing ad hoc committee to approve the revision to board policy DIDB as presented. I do not need a second coming from the committee. So any questions? Hearing no questions, all in favor, please address by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. All right. 4.05, deletion of policy DID, audits. Recommended motion from internal auditing ad hoc committee to approve the deletion of board policy DIB. Coming from the committee, it needs no second. Any questions? All in favor, please address by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. 4.06, deletion of policy DIDA, external auditor. Recommended motion from internal auditing ad hoc committee to approve the deletion of board policy DIDA. Needs no second. Any questions? Hearing no questions, all in favor, please address by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries.
Ms. Winslow.
Yes, ma'am.
Just for, if there's anybody still listening that cares anything about our policies, just to kind of give some clarification, where the deletion of these policies is because of the revision of the policy of 4.04, we are including that information in that policy. So we're not deleting the need for an external auditor. We just incorporated that into the policy, the revised policy.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Wells. Thank you. 4.07, approval of audit team committee. Recommended motion from the internal audit ad hoc committee to approve the members of the ad hoc committee for internal auditing to service as the audit team committee until June 30th, 2021. Coming from the ad hoc committee, it needs no second. Are there any questions? Hearing no questions, all in favor, please address by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Did somebody say something?
Debbie.
Okay, all opposed, the motion carries. All right. 4.08, Old Northwest Child Development Center lease agreement renewal with Share Head Start. Recommended motion from the administration to approve the lease agreement renewal with Share Head Start.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Grayson.
I make a motion to approve the lease agreement renewal with Share Head Start.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Ms. Bush. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, please address by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. 5.01, committee liaison reports. I would call on Mr. Meek.
Madam Chairman, the report from the Internal Auditing Ad Hoc Committee is complete, so I would ask that we be discontinued, or whatever the appropriate word is.
Okay, so you have completed the task and there's no longer a need in the,
The motion, Madam Chair.
yes. All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, Ms. Grayson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Advocacy Committee is meeting next Tuesday at 11 o'clock. to consider some resolutions about the allocation of CARES Act dollars to private schools. And so in keeping with our longstanding policy position that we believe that taxpayers' dollars should stay in public schools. And I have hard copies here. I would encourage all board members to listen in. I'm going to do it with PSC. And I have hard copies of the draft resolutions if you would like to see. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anyone have any questions for Ms. Grayson? All right, at this time, I'd also like to give you just an FYI that the South Carolina School Board Association, the conference will be December 4th in Columbia at the Convention Center. It will be a half-day conference. They are requesting that in order to make an in-person delegate assembly as safe as possible, the South Carolina School Board Association is asking local boards to limit the number of delegates to 1 per district. So with that being said, please let me know so that we can come up with who will take care of our paperwork. Yes, Mr. Sailors.
Just some additional clarification, if I could. This meeting will take roughly 2 hours according to the agenda we've already put together. The work that has been assembled for the meeting is fairly basic and bare bones when it comes to our needing to take position on resolutions related to legislative action. We felt it was very important to do a face-to-face, but finding a space where we can distance accordingly at an affordable price has been almost impossible. So for various reasons, we've asked that each district, regardless of size, limit their representation to 1. We're also asking the districts to take the time between now and then to review the material that'll be coming from the state to the delegate assembly and make the decision among your board whether you want to take your delegate votes and split them or ask them all in one particular topic or the other. I know that you've asked for volunteers. I would like to suggest that we have the confidence in Ms. Wells to send her on our behalf since she is the board representative for Rankin County.
I am in total agreement with that. I know that we've cut our travel budget, and since Ms. Wells will be there anyway, I think it's important, but it's
And it's, I don't, if
a half a day.
Feels appropriate, fine, but we're just trying to, there's nothing sexy about this meeting. It's at the Columbia Convention Center. We're going to get there at 12, leave at 2, or whatever the numbers are, and that's it. And so it's on a Friday afternoon or Friday during the day. And so it's just action of taking business with the state association. So that's the additional background. Thank you.
Mr. Lewis?
Clarifying question for member. So if each district is sending one person, are the number of votes and delegates still going to be fulfilled?
The number of votes are weighted to the district. And I'll be brutally honest with you, Greenville is the exception to the rule in most cases where we have more than 1 or 2 delegates going to the conference any given year anyway. Granted, we have the largest number of votes in the state, followed by Charleston and Horry County. And we're fortunate enough that we've had 6, 7, 8 members of this board attend in the past, and we've been able to delegate accordingly. But this is the one request that we're asking for your support on.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Point of personal privilege, if I may. I want to just say thanks to everybody for reaching out to me about Jake. I'm so happy that he's responded well to the surgery and working hard to make his way to Furman. And I just thank you all so much for your thoughts and prayers and sharing them with me. Thanks.
Welcome. Anyone else? We've got 6.01 financial report, monthly financial report.
Gosh, I'm
Due to the time of the year, we don't have a monthly financial report, and obviously we're continuing to closely watch our revenues. I don't think Ms. Stack has anything of note to report tonight, do you, Robert? So answer any question you might have.
How much was the power bill this month?
It'll be.
I also want to, before Mr. Meek wants to adjourn, want to thank Nancy Fitzer. I have sent her so many emails in the last several months, and she has responded to so many people, and Terry Brinkman. I mean, they have been phenomenal. I cannot thank them enough. They get these people to the right person. Sometimes I'll list the person for them to contact, but and they get on it ASAP. And I think that's important. And I'm very thankful for everyone that has stepped up to the plate to meet the needs of so many constituents in our community that have continuous questions about continuous situations. Thank you so much. With that being said, Ms. Wells, wait a minute, Ms.
That's okay. I have a financial question. I'll just ask offline.
Okay. Mr. Meek?
Second. Third.
All those in favor, please address by saying aye.
Aye. Thank you all for everyone, all the board members staying the entire time. Thank you.
Roger, good job on the.
Good night.
Thank you.